Hey y'all, Phyllis here. My website is southernfrugal.com. Well, it is story time again, and I wanted to make myself a whole bunch of notes because I don't want to miss anything on this story. So, the story begins in the early fall of 2001, and Mr. Bucky was working as headmaster of a private school in McCormick County here in South Carolina. And he had just retired from public school. He was a public school superintendent for the county we live in right now. And we still owned this home back then. And so Mr. Bucky had rented a small house. I think that house was built in probably the 1950s or late 1940s. It was a nice little house, and it was maybe about 15 minutes south of the school where he was headmaster. So he also was headmaster, and he coached football, which of course he loved. So anyway, we were there in that little house. It was so cute, and we had all this furniture then, and a lot of furniture in our attic, and so I was able to furnish that home. It was just a little 2-bedroom home of 1 bath, and the back had another little room that had bunk beds in it, and then it had a nice big kitchen, almost as big as the one in our house right now. And so I busied myself cleaning up everything and washing down walls and cabinets and all that, and getting it ready. And what we were planning to do was we would be up there during the week, and then we'd come back to our home on the weekends. So anyway, he started coaching football. Actually, he started coaching football. They practiced and everything starting in August. So I was there doing all the cleaning, and I even decided that I would take all my paints and canvases and my just everything to do with my painting up there. And I had repainted that little back bedroom and had actually refinished the floors, and because they were nice oak floors. And I also brought one of the antique rugs up there, and I had me a nice little studio all set up. I had my oil paints there and my acrylics. I was ready to go. The house was all clean and everything. So it was also, of course, football season beginning for college football, which Mr. Bucky, and he will tell you this, he is major addicted to. And I have learned to accept that over many years. So no problem there. I always just find me something to do. And so anyway, that little house that Mr. Bucky rented, the people that owned the house, the lady had grown up in that house. That was a house her father built, and it was sort of sitting back off in the woods a little bit. And then their bigger house, it was all brick and nice, was in front of it, but a distance in front. And so our little house that we rented backed up to the Sumter National Forest, which was good. It was very quiet, and even in August it was very cool there. So we were, just everything was great, and that little house really didn't even have to have air conditioning because there was so much forest all around. So the people that rented us the house, I'll call him Mr. Gene. Gene was his name. He had what his wife called a commodities business. That's what she called it. What it was a whole bunch of junk overall spread out in the woods behind the little house we had rented. He even had a Class A camper sitting there, and all kinds of stuff like aluminum roofing, and I just can't even imagine what. An old car was there, and then behind that there was another building, and that building, it was a small building, but he used that as a deer processing place. And so during deer season, folks would bring their deers that they shot, I guess, to him, and he would dress them and take care of the meat and everything. So that was behind us. And so anyway, of course, we had our dog, Gray was his name then. He was a miniature poodle, but he was a tall miniature poodle. So he really actually measured about 15 inches at the shoulder. So he was bigger than a miniature. He was almost like a runt of a standard poodle, but he was still a miniature. And he was gray, just like our two dogs now. And so he was a rescue dog, and we had him for a while. And he was definitely my dog. And so anyway, we were up there and, ready to start our life during the week up there. And so I was out in the yard one day, and there's really nice little yard around, but there was forest pretty close around. And the man who owned the place always ended up mowing it because he had one of those big tractor mower things, and he would just come and whisk around the yard. And so I would be letting Gray out, to take care of his business, and he got real interested in something on the ground, so I went over there, and it was a pile of poop from some kind of animal. And so I ended up getting a little hand shovel and just buried it. So, you know how dogs are, I didn't want him rolling in it or anything, which dogs do that sometimes. And so then on the other side of the house, there was another pile, so I buried that. So then the next day, let the dog out, same thing, only in a different place, more piles of the same thing. So Mr. Bucky and I talked about it, and we figured that it was probably a big dog, that was out there. I don't know, we never saw a dog, but that's what we thought it probably was. So that brings us then to, y'all sort of understand what the setting was. We were really almost surrounded by the Sumter National Forest in that location. There weren't many houses at all on that road. And in fact, if you were in the house and you pointed towards the road, everything on the right side was all Sumter National Forest. There were no houses on down that way, but there was a road that went through. So it was a Friday night, or Friday afternoon, because in August and September it really doesn't get dark till much later. So Mr. Bucky was preparing for his football game. I think they took him out to eat before the game or something. And so I had let our dog Gray out to take care of his business. And instead of taking care of his business around in the yard, he decided he would go down that little two-lane or little two-rut road, we called it, down to the deer processing area. There was nobody there because I don't think deer season had been in full swing for very long. I think it starts in August. And so he went down there, and I heard him. He just really kind of took off and went down there. So I thought, okay, I'm going to have to go get him. So he was barking and barking. So I walked on down there. Now, there's a little creek that runs in through there. And at that time of the year, the water was running about maybe that wide. It was just a real small little creek, but the water was running in it. So there he was at the base of this huge pine tree, barking and barking, clawing with his paws at the trunk of the tree and barking and barking. And I didn't want to have to walk all the way down there, so I kept calling him, Gray, come in. He wouldn't come. He kept barking and scratching at the tree, and the more I called him, the madder I got. So finally I just went stomping down there, and I went to the base of the tree, and I picked him up, and he's in my arms, and he's still barking at the tree. So I was so irritated at him. Now, he weighed about 34 pounds, so I had to hold him and walk all the way back to the house. Never looked up in the tree, not once, because I was just sure it was a squirrel, because he really liked to chase squirrels around. So I just knew it was a squirrel, didn't think any more about it. So then, of course, I had fixed the house up and fixed up my little area that I was going to use as a little studio. I couldn't wait to get started painting because I didn't have anything else to do. I'd taken care of all the cleaning and all that. So anyway, after I had gotten Gray back from that little creek area, and so then we were just in the house waiting for Mr. Bucky to get home from the ball game, which was probably going to be 10 or 10:30 that night. And I could hear shooting, okay? A lot of people shooting in the woods. And I mean, a lot of it. And I thought, okay, maybe somebody's having target practice. I don't know what they were doing, but somebody was shooting guns. So then that kind of, when Mr. Bucky got home, I said, well, what were all those people doing shooting at night? And he said, well, it was probably hunters. I don't know if they hunt coon at night or what, but that's probably what it was. So anyway, that after the game, everything was fine, and we watched a little TV, the news, and everything, and went to bed. So the next morning was Saturday morning, and Mr. Bucky, of course, went back to the school, and they watched the films. Him and the assistant coach watched the films and get all the stats straight for the game. So he was back home by, I don't know, probably 11:30, 12 o'clock that day. We had a little lunch, and of course, all the college games had started at that point, so he ended up watching the games, and so then he said, well, why don't we go out to eat tonight? And I said, well, where's there to go here? Because it's just a little small town. There's really nowhere to go. And he said, well, they were telling me about a real nice restaurant in Augusta. And I said, you mean Augusta, Georgia? And he said, yeah, it's only 45 minutes from here, because we were pretty far over. I said, well, great. So anyway, we decided we would go, and it was, we left our dog Gray in the house and went to Augusta and had a really nice meal. And then we came back home. And so we pulled up in the yard, and the lights on the car, Mr. Bucky, of course, was driving, and the lights on the car shone across where there was this, what shall I call it? I don't know what you call those things. It was one of those great big cement things that they put in ditches for driveways, only it was real, real big around. And in fact, I had been out there and looked around that thing just to make sure it wouldn't go roll over on my dog, but it was real thick cement pipe is what it was. It was about, I'd say, 6 foot long and maybe, I don't know, at least 3 foot high, but it was laying down on the ground there on the side yard. So when we pulled in, the lights from the car were shining in that direction, and at one end of the little pipe thing, I saw these 2 big orange eyes at one end of it. And I said, Bucky, what is that? That looks like, I don't know what that is. And I first thought it was a cow. But then I realized that cows don't have eyes in the front. They have eyes on the side of their head, and their eyes aren't yellow. And I thought, okay, well, maybe it was because the light was shining in the eyes. And so Mr. Bucky looked, and of course, whatever those eyes belonged to had looked like had left. So he didn't see anything, and so I thought, well, maybe it was a dog or something. Maybe that's the dog that's been pooping all around the house. And so he went to get out of the car, and I looked back over there, and the thing had ducked down behind the little pipe thing and came to the other end and raised up. And I realized, wait a minute, for that thing to be able to do that, it's got to be pretty tall. And those don't look like dog eyes. They don't look like cow eyes. That looks like cat eyes because they were bright yellow. And of course the light from the car was reflecting off of them. And I said, Mr. Bucky, what is that? Look. And he looked, and it ducked again. So he didn't see it at all. And so he said, well, let's just go in. So we got out of the car and we're walking across the yard, and Mr. Bucky was walking too slow for me. I said, we need to hurry up and get in the house. I don't know what that was. And he really, I think, thought it was a dog. And I, in the back of my mind, thought it was a dog, too. I really did. So we go on in the house, and really didn't go to bed till after the news was off, because this was on a Saturday. And he always watches all the football game scores. And by the way, the restaurant we went to had a bar in the back, and they had big screens back there, which is probably why we went to that restaurant to begin with, but the food was good. Anyway, so he was watching the news and watching the scores and everything, and of course, we were both tired, and we'd had a big meal, so time to go to bed. So our bedroom was in the front of the house, so the windows in the bedroom were off the porch. In other words, the front porch was right off that. It wasn't a screened-in porch. It was just a nice little porch. And we had a fan in that window because you didn't have to have air conditioning, because with all the trees and everything, it was always cool at night. So we had the fan in that window and had the fan blowing in with all that fresh, really just clean, super clean air. It was great and it was cool. So we had the fan going, and Gray, our little poodle's bed was right down below that window, which was right beside our bed. So we went to bed and went fast asleep, and I guess it was, I'm just guessing now because I didn't really look at the clock. I don't remember doing that. I guess it was probably 3 o'clock in the morning, and Gray was barking, and then growling and barking and growling. And Mr. Bucky, of course, was sound asleep, snoring, and I didn't want him to wake him up, so I was trying to get the dog to be quiet, and then I started wondering, well, what is he barking at? And so I looked out. I got out of bed and I looked out the window, and I didn't really see anything. Well, the dog kept barking and barking, and I would make him get in his bed, and he'd get back up and start barking again. So finally, I had already gotten back in bed. I just kind of rolled out of the bed. There was carpet in that room, by the way. So I rolled out of the bed, just kind of on my knees, and was going to look out through the fan, because you could still see through the fan. Well, I saw something, and that something was a humongous black cat of some kind. It was not a house cat, and it was level with me. So it had to, its head would have had to have been, I would just guess, 2.5 feet tall, maybe more, staring right in the window, and it breathed, and I smelled its breath because the fan was blowing the air in. I thought I would just gag and throw up right there. That thing had been eating something really rotten. I mean, you ever smell something that's been hit on the road, something big, and the smell is just awful. And I was just trying to get it out of my nose. And then I was like, now remember, this is like 3 in the morning, so I'm not fully there mentally, but I got fully there real quick because I could see the head, and I knew it was some kind of cat, and I knew it was black. And there was a swing on the porch, so as it left, of course, I just panicked and jerked the fan out of the window and slammed the window down, and it went off to the side and, of course, hit that swing that was on the porch. So the swing was kind of going back and forth. And Mr. Bucky was still asleep. I promise you, he was still asleep. And so I woke him up. I said, there is a big cat out there, and it's black, and it's not a house cat. And he was like, what do you mean? And I said, that's what was behind that culvert pipe thing. It was a humongous cat of some kind. And I said, it is black. Scared me. I went around the whole house, let down every window, and locked it, because believe me, as big as that thing was, it could have come through the window, and I really think it was after our dog. That's what I think it was after. And I also think we were in its territory, because nobody had lived in that house for, I don't know, a year or two before we moved in. And I think that cat had its territory. That's why it was pooping all around the house. And of course, our dog was real interested in that. And then I had remembered back that when I was cleaning up that bearing, that's what I was doing. And it wasn't that much, but it was more than a dog would do, I thought, unless it was a huge dog. And I could see hair in there, like it looked like squirrel hair or rabbit hair, kind of a grayish color. So I knew whatever it was had been maybe eating squirrels or rabbits, something. It wasn't like just normal, And so I remembered all that, and so anyway, we talked about it, and I said, well, I'm afraid to take the dog out tomorrow morning. So didn't know what to do, and then realizing that thing, instead of running away when we pulled the car up in the yard that night, it just dug down and came up it was watching us, and then for it to come up on the little porch like that and be right at the window was just I mean, that thing, I mean, the screens are plastic, right? It wouldn't have taken anything for the thing to have come through the screen, because I really think that it was after our dog. That's what I think it was after. Anyway, they did have the deer processing thing behind that house. I mean, it was back in the woods. It wasn't right up close to the house, but it was back there. And I think that cat had been eating some of the stuff maybe they threw out to do with the deer processing. I don't even know anything about that, but I knew that's what he did back there. So anyway, that kind of made us make the decision that I would come back here and stay, and that Mr. Bucky would work during the week up there and come home on the weekends, and that's what we did for the next several years. And I never went back up there, nor did I take the dog. I was afraid to. But anyway, so I came on back home with the dog, and so Mr. Bucky went into work on Monday, and they happened to have a board meeting that night, and he was mentioning that I had seen some kind of really big black cat, and it wasn't a house cat, that had come up on our front porch and was at the window. And so as soon as he said that, one of the board members said, "Oh, that was the Black Panther." And Mr. Puggy said, "What do you mean, Black Panther?" And he said, "Well, we've got some in this area. A lot of people have seen them." And so he started telling Mr. Bucky about, he had a farm now, and they had, the tractors and all that. And he was out plowing a field, and he kind of came around a corner, and there was a Black Panther standing right there in front of him. He said it scared him to death. He didn't know what to do. He just turned the tractor around and just left. But said he was standing right there in the field, and they were just kind of staring at each other. And so then his secretary up there also lived, she had inherited, I think, the farm that had belonged to her father. Well, her father was still alive, and they were caring for him. So they were out in the country, and they had horses and dogs. And they also had a dog, the Great Pyrenees, that big the big white dog that they usually have for sheep, I think. Anyway, she had one of those. And she said one morning before work, she had gone out to feed the horses, and she came around the side of her barn, and there was a big black cat standing there just staring at her. So that was two accounts that we knew of. So there was no doubt that's what I saw also. And clearly the thing that I saw had terrible breath. And I mean, we were that close to each other because it was, the little fan was there, and the fan was on, and I was looking through the blades at it, and it was, of course, blowing the air right in my face from that thing's breath. It was just rotten. You really just one time breathing it in, it made you want to gag. It smelled so bad. And so anyway, after that, I had already come back here, and with the dog, but it was good to know that other people had seen it too. It wasn't just me. And it was scary because clearly we were sort of in his territory, or her, I don't know which it was. So anyway, that brings me to the last part of this. So there have been reports in South Carolina for many years of black panthers. The South Carolina wildlife people never, ever have believed it, never. And every time somebody reports one, now we didn't report it, of course, but other people had, and they said it was impossible and it couldn't be and all that. And so anyway, there is a video on YouTube, and I'm going to leave the link right down below here, and I want y'all to be sure and watch it. It's only, I think, 38 seconds, but it's people, I think they're Army, and I'm not sure if they're where they are, but they're going down a road, and it sounds like they're in a great big truck. And I think the camera's on the helmet. I'm just guessing, but that's what I think it is, because it's a night vision thing. It looks green, and clearly it is a black panther. It's not a leopard that you can sort of see spots on it. This thing that I saw was not fat in the face. It was slim. its ears were not all that super rounded. They were more kind of a pointed ear, but not real pointed. But it did. I mean, I know what leopards look like, and it looked different than that, but it was definitely black. And also, and it had real yellow eyes, real yellow. Or maybe they just showed up super yellow because it was black. But anyway, there is a video, and I want y'all, please scroll down below this video and look at that video, and you're going to know what came up on our porch that night and what had been pooping all around the house. I'm sure that it was trying to show us, this is my territory, you need to get out. I don't know. I think that's what it was doing. But anyway, there have been many sightings in South Carolina all over the state. And I guess my opinion is that many people couldn't possibly be wrong. And the other thing is, I know exactly what I saw. And like the fish and wildlife people were saying, oh, they really saw a bear. Oh, they really saw a coyote. I understand they're black coyotes. Y'all, this was not a coyote, okay? Definitely not. And it was definitely a cat. And I don't know what kind it was, because I don't think mountain lions come in black, but I would describe it as the size of a mountain lion. And that's the way I would have described it. And the other thing was its face. Like if you see pictures of those kind of leopards that actually are more of a black color, they got this real fat face, but this thing didn't. This thing had a slimmer looking face to me. I mean, I didn't see it real clear because we had a security light up there on one side of the house, and it was sort of shining at an angle across the porch, so it wasn't like I saw it in broad open daylight. It was 3 o'clock or so in the morning. So anyway, y'all tell me what you think about this, and be sure and look at the video that's going to be right under this video, and just click on it, and you can see that video. Now, that what the wildlife people had said, because I of course came home and started reading up on it, because I was fearful for Mr. Bucky to be up there. Although I don't think that cat could have taken down a human, but it could sure taken a dog or a deer, a small young deer probably. And oh, I forgot to tell you one other thing. Our landlords for that house, of course I told you, lived in a brick house right in front of that house, but a distance away, but it was up on the road. And they had 2 dogs. One was a little Chihuahua, and the other one was a little young beagle, real cute little dog. And of course, our dog just loved to go visit their 2 dogs, because what she would do is put them out in the backyard on one of those things that you screw into the ground, those metal things, and tie a little leash to it so the dog can play around a little bit. And her dog got missing. And there wasn't one doubt in my mind what happened to that little dog, okay? Because, I mean, this was the territory of this cat, and I guess anything in the territory that it could get that would be small enough. But she had asked us about it, and we had actually been here on the weekend and went back, and she had asked Mr. Bucky if he had seen their little dog. Of course, Mr. Bucky figured the same thing I did when he told me about it. I think that cat probably got that little puppy. It was about maybe that tall. It wasn't a fully grown beagle. So anyway, sad. But y'all tell me what you think. It was quite an experience, I'll have to tell you. And of course, vividly in my mind is the smell coming from the breath of that cat. It was just, it had clearly been eating some kind of carrion or something. And I could just, that breath was so, to think about it gives me the shivers. Anyway, y'all let me know what you think. Now, I know many people in South Carolina have seen these black panthers. That's what they are. And the wildlife people will not accept it until I guess they get a dead one. I don't know any other thing. They were trying to say maybe if people had that kind of cat as a pet and it got loose or something, but for so many people to have seen those in all areas of South Carolina, tells me there's a lot more than just one here. So anyway, that's the story for today, and we will see y'all next time. Bye for now.